you want to talk about some whey protein? Because I definitely do.
Yeah, tell me.
Okay. So I was on Amazon earlier this week, just like looking for some new whey protein. And I
I
ended
love
up
that you
getting
have it
this.
on the ready.
I got it in the mail. I went through the whole thing with Ollie, and then I was like, I need to talk to Stas about this because it's so on brand for what we were talking about last week in a lot of ways. Okay. We're going to go through this together, though, if that's okay with you. This is called Naked Whey.
Mm.
Have you ever heard of this?
No, but it promises that it is with no additives.
Promises
Well, no, just
no
the
additives.
title, right? Like Naked Whey. To me, it evokes this idea of your way, none of those bad things that you don't like.
Exactly. And so then its registered trademark one liner down here says only 3 premium ingredients with nothing to hide. Okay, so 3 premium ingredients, nothing to hide. Yeah. Okay. Then I look on the back and I'm like, this is amazing. They have me in mind. I'm the consumer. I'm perfect. Like, this is the best company in the world. Now I go to the ingredients and now I realize why I bought it. I like this. So whey protein concentrate, organic coconut sugar, which I've realized this is why I bought it because I hate stevia and I
Mm.
hate anything sweetened with stevia. And then it was like 5 grams of total sugar. So I was like, that's acceptable. I can handle 5 grams of coconut sugar. I think I'm okay with that. Okay, but ingredient number 3 is our favorite natural flavor. Okay, the naked difference over here. This is like the back of the label. Here's a relevant bullet point. No artificial sweeteners, flavors, or colors.
It's
They're,
it's true. They are natural flavors.
yes. So, I mean, yeah, always naked. Let me just read you this because this is their motto. This is how they want to connect with the consumer. They say, using pasture-fed cow's milk from small dairy farms, we use careful manufacturing processes to create a denatured whey loaded with essential amino acids, glutathione, and clean protein.
It's
Naked
denatured.
whey,
Sorry.
denatured, like
It's
nature,
like, what is that word?
denatured,
I've never heard that before. That's a really weird description.
denatured, of course. Yes, non-denatured. Okay, thank you
So
for the double
a
freaking negative.
denatured protein is one that unfolds and doesn't behave properly in water anymore. And so like when you drink
Okay,
milk, milk is like a smooth beverage. And if the
yes,
protein in it denatures, it clumps. And so you can't get it back
interesting.
into solution because it's fucked structurally.
Okay, well, it's non-denatured, which makes it the best. Naked Whey contains only 3 premium ingredients. We are committed to shortening the steps between our farms and you. Don't let labels and big agribusiness fool you. Additives are for their bottom line, not your health. So they like really make me believe that they're here for my health. They're like, this is the best thing in the world for you and for the cows and for the planet. And then have these natural flavors. What do you think about this?
I mean,
I'm gonna do it. I'm just gonna have the whey, and I'm gonna everything I eat has natural flavors in it. This is what I realized this week looking at ingredients. Everything.
I mean, so the thing is that if it was just vanilla, they could have just labeled it as vanillin, which is like the chemical that makes the vanilla flavor. And I'm like, wouldn't it be better if it was vanilla extract? Like if you want to make it taste like vanilla, the easiest way that you could do that is you could just add vanilla. And so when they label it natural flavors, does that mean that they added something that wasn't vanilla? They added something else? Or are they labeling vanilla as natural flavor? And I'm like, if they could label it as vanilla, you would assume that they would just do that because that looks better on the label.
Right.
And so I don't know. I'm like, whenever I buy protein, I don't buy the flavored stuff. I just buy the whey and then mix it in with, like, if you want to make it vanilla flavored, you can just add a couple drops of vanilla extract.
Interesting. I've never even considered that. In my mind, like protein is always a flavor. It's always like a birthday cake or like a peanut butter cup.
Oh my God. Right. But that's the world that we live in, where it's just like you go to the store and you're like, "Ooh, this is pre-mixed for my flavor profile. Thank you, company." And so we're just so used to the fact that food is manufactured already in these pre-flavored components. And I get why, because like I cook at home a lot. And it's really difficult to come up with regular flavorful meals that don't take up a lot of time. And so we just always end up coming down to, okay, well, we're just going to eat the same 2 meals. It used to be 1 meal, so we've graduated. Now it's the same 2 meals. But it's fucking boring.
Yeah.
It's much more interesting to be able to grab something from the freezer and like, ooh, enchiladas of this flavor, like spaghetti of this flavor, like, oh, look, they've made me tortellinis, perfect. But it's like every single thing that you buy at the store has natural flavors, and I think that has to do with the fact that they're using their, I mean, look, because whey protein comes in unflavored forms, I feel like this is like a consumer choice thing. Like you can easily buy a whey protein. I guarantee you that Naked Protein or whatever it is makes one that is unflavored. And there probably only has 2 ingredients. It probably is just the protein and coconut sugar. Like I buy 11-pound bags of whey protein.
Is it a single ingredient? It's just whey protein concentrate?
100% whey, yeah.
Okay. And so you would just get your sugar from something else if you wanted it, and your flavor from something else.
Yeah, like I put it in smoothies, and so the smoothie is like I'm actually really struggling with this right now because I've been drinking a lot of plant milk. I've been drinking like coconut milk.
Yeah, me too.
Because I get farts if I eat milk. It's disgusting. I hate it. And so I've been drinking plant milk, and then I bought this macadamia nut milk because I love macadamia nuts, and they fucking snuck the natural flavors in. And so I'm just like, I like the flavor of it. And it's crazy because it makes the coffee taste basically like melted ice cream.
Ugh.
But I'm like, that's probably not good for me. But I'm still drinking it because I'm like, this is delicious. But when it comes to the smoothies, it's like some kind of plant milk, a bunch of, we go to Costco and we get like a giant bag of frozen berries.
Yeah.
Like mixed berries, and then like banana peanut butter. And so I think that I have a sneaking suspicion that the best thing that somebody can do for their diet is cut out natural flavors. Like, I have no evidence to back that up. That is not at all, I haven't read any literature on it, but I'm just like, if I think about the foods that I look at the grocery store that have natural flavors in them, it immediately forces you into making different choices. And it's not a
It immediately forces me into cooking my own food. Like there's no pre-packaged food that I can buy. Like I go to Trader Joe's, and I love all of their like frozen meals or even their refrigerated meals. And they all have, this is what I noticed like 4 days ago after we had that conversation was, shit, literally everything that's like not me just like buying a bag of spinach or like buying this bag of nuts has natural flavors in it.
And I'm like, we know that there are flavors in the world that can be added into making something. Like if you wanted something that was like, chili lime almonds, like you could make that without natural flavors. You could like salt, chili powder, smoked paprika, salt, and like lime powder. Like you could do that. Like I have a box of lime powder in my cupboard because I was when I go backpacking, I'll like pre-make my own meals. Mm-hmm. And so it's all powdered. And so you can actually buy like powdered peanut butter. You can buy powdered lime. And so you can make all this stuff dry and then you just add water to it. And so I know that you can buy just straight powdered lime that you could put on the almonds. And when they add the natural flavors, to me, it's like they're trying to make it, it's called a hyperstimulus. Have you heard this term before?
Mm-mm.
Where it's like we have flavor receptors and taste receptors and appetites that are probably evolutionarily programmed. Like you like salt, you like fat
Oh,
because these
yeah.
things are hard to get in the environment. You like sugar because
Yeah.
that's also hard to get. And when companies manufacture stuff and they need it to be irresistible, they need it to be something that you want to keep eating as opposed to getting kind of saturated, I think that they add natural flavors to change the profile a little bit so that you can keep consuming it.
It's almost like an addictive property.
Like I've read about this with Coca-Cola, where like Coca-Cola is formulated in such a way where you never get sensitized to the taste. Like the first cup of Coca-Cola tastes exactly the same as the 10th cup of Coca-Cola that you have that day.
Yeah.
And it's formulated specifically to not have any like residual flavorings so that you're always thirsty for the next cup. And that's not accidental. That is something that was like food scientist researched and engineered in order to make sure that it was a substance that you could consume massive quantities of without ever getting sensitized to it. And so I think that natural flavors are probably that line.
Yeah.
Of manufacturing. And I'm sure that they mean well. I'm sure that they're not trying to lie to you. It's just, how else are you going to get vanilla into whey protein? Like milk doesn't taste like vanilla.
Right. Yeah. I'm not mad at them about it. I am noticing how much I will outsource my research to like the first marketing slogan that I see from a company where I'm like, oh, okay, like this is good for me. It's 3 simple ingredients. Thanks so much. I don't need to go farther. I don't need to actually like read the ingredient label because you already told me. It's amazing. So thank you. I'm just gonna buy this. And then it shows up and I'm like, what did I do? Like I just didn't even look at this at all before it showed up at my house.
Well, it's crazy. So there's actually there's a huge problem with labeling quality where they'll say that there's one thing in the container and there's actually another thing in the container. So for example, like if I look at, there's this website called Labdoor, and they grade things on the basis of how good the like how the contents of the package relate to the label. And they don't test everything. So it's not a website that you can like look at all products and find something. But for example, like there's a pure protein whey protein. And they advertise that each serving has 25 grams of protein, but in reality, it's only 19.6. But then you get into other stuff, which has to do with like vitamins and stuff. And they've actually stopped recently. It used to be, I'm looking at their website right now. It used to be that you could go look at the website and they would just have tons of stuff that wasn't, especially vitamins and supplements. They would have like lead in them. Okay, here, great, exactly. So I'm looking at top 10 green tea products. A bunch of them are A+, and then there's some that are C. Okay, so C, what is it? You look at it. So there's a bunch less of some kind of green tea compound. It's supposed to have 400 milligrams, but it only has 200. And then they test for heavy metals and they find arsenic, lead, cadmium, and mercury.
Jeez.
Small amounts, right? Like well below like whatever limits are placed on like by food manufacturing. But you're getting a supplement that isn't really tested. And so it's hard to find stuff necessarily that is solid because they don't, labels lie. That's the game. And it's kind of devastating because you really want to believe in the fact that it's trustworthy what it says on the bottle, but there's only so many people that are testing it and looking. And it's really interesting. Labdoor cleaned up their website to a great degree because it used to be that there was a ton of stuff that failed their quality controls. And I think that they scrubbed it. because they found enough stuff that was maybe good. I don't know. Oh, this is great. Okay, so top 10 meal replacements. And they have Slim Fast Original gets a failing grade.
Oh no! This was like such a popular diet drink when I was growing up. I remember like I would sometimes have one from my mom's stash.
And this is crazy. They don't they hid it so you have to actually like log in to see the full report.
Oh man, they're gonna gate the juiciest ones. Tell me what's wrong with Slim Fast, damn it.
I know, right? It's maybe I bet you that they might have gotten sued or something. Like, right? Because these companies need to maintain their they need to maintain their market share. And so if you have a website that's like, no, this product sucks, and they can find some grounds on which to sue them, I can imagine that that's like definitely a desire. And so I feel like there's a history to relate it back to like nobody has the problem that they think they have. There's a tendency to consume supplements and to consume all sorts of extra extraneous substances for either longevity or health or whatever else. And a lot of the times the stuff is so not good for you that you're creating a new problem for yourself. And by eating the stuff that's not really and truly what it promises to be, you're basically screwing yourself. I'm trying to see, there's a report I remember a while ago that said that do you know what spirulina is?
Mm-hmm. I had some this morning.
There was a report that basically said that all spirulina was contaminated with microplastics.
That would not surprise me. Where are they harvesting spirulina from? Are they like getting it from a water source, or are they farming it?
Oh no. Probably both. This is more data than I have time to dig through while we're trying to talk about it. But I don't know. This is why people have servants. This is like why historically people have always had servants, because the problem is that in order to get good stuff, you have to put the time into cooking for yourself. Cooking for yourself is really difficult. And so people outsource the problem to getting somebody else to do it for them. The modern equivalent is restaurants, right? We've outsourced servants to the restaurants. And we're like, well, no, they get money off of it. So it's okay. And it's like, it's true, but it is a service industry.
I'm thinking of maybe, when we get some more cash flow opening up, like doing some sort of like having somebody come over to the house and like meal prep for us for the week. Because the restaurant thing is also, just because like I have money to go spend at a restaurant doesn't mean like that's the type of food I want to be eating either, because they're not making it with the ingredients that I would make it with at home.
And it's weird because there's not really a restaurant meal that I can have that outshines what I can make at home if I put some legwork into it.
For sure. If I'm just in like a throw whatever together type of mood, then like, yeah, this is just going to be like a get me to the next leg of life meal. But the stuff that I have worked on, like the flavors and stuff at home, it's just like, dude, like if I got this at a restaurant, like this is a $30 a plate meal right here.
Yeah, and so I just this is kind of a problem that nobody's been able to solve. There's the food prep services, the Blue Apron and the box food.
Hello Fresh.
Have you ever tried those?
No, I just keep getting Hello Fresh, their mail situations where they're like, we'll send you 10,000 meals for free. Just try it.
Exactly. I mean, there's a part of me that's like, maybe.
That's how I feel about it. I'm like, maybe, like you say that this is going from, literally they say it's going from a farm to your house in like 3 days. I don't know. Like maybe I'm fucking lying about that, but it was like no way could a grocery store do this for you. And so I was like, is this being like somehow farm to table somehow? And maybe it is, but that could be a cool route if like that is what I think it is, if it's sort of like bypassing the whole grocery store timeline of shit, this banana was probably picked a month ago.
Yeah. And it's like, I have very complex feelings about outsourcing labor. Like, I hate cleaning my house.
Yeah.
And I think all the time, I'm like, if we had money, maybe we could get a maid. And then I think about it and I'm like, and this is kind of like peak villain mentality. I'm like, no, that's sinful. Literally, that is the mindset that I have about it. And it's weird.
Gosh.
Like, I wasn't raised religious. Like, I was raised deeply atheistic, like Soviet family. Like, we went to synagogue like once or twice, like once a year, maybe. And so the idea of sin as being a motivating factor in how I do things is absolutely absurd in context of my upbringing. And yet I'm highly moralistic about these things where I'm like, it is morally wrong to not clean your own house. I'm like, where the fuck does that come from? Is that true? I don't know. Feels true.
Well, what do you think you get from cleaning your house that you lose if you outsource it?
I literally think that you get closer to God. So my conception of God is that God is the universe. So all things everything in existence conspires to enact consequences upon you for the actions that you take. And so cause and effect, action, consequence, that is God. And so when people talk about the wrath of God and the fact that you're going to get smited, I translate that to the fact that like if you do bad shit, the universe will punish you over a long enough arc of time. Like I think that it was Martin Luther King Jr. who said that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. And so I'm like, okay, I can conceptualize the idea of God, which I think is a valuable idea because it makes you think about consequences. And I'm like, the work of the human is to put order onto things. That's what we do. That's what we always do. My house is taking trees and putting crystalline order onto them. The act of cooking something is putting order on a bunch of ingredients that are scattered through the ether into a pot and then onto a plate. And so anytime that you can take the universe and you can order it, that is you basically asking the universe to not punish you. It is you erecting this safety barrier against the fact that the universe wants to kill you. It wants nothing more than to take your body and to decompose it into its constituent parts if there are creatures that are more effective than you at ordering it. And so for me, I'm like, okay, so if I clean, what I'm doing is I'm practicing putting order on things. And if I maintain the cleanliness, then I'm practicing a constant maintenance of the servitude to the consequences of the universe. And so it's like, I see it as training for bigger and harder things. And if I don't clean, if I outsource it to somebody else, what I'm basically saying is like, I abdicate responsibility for my own space and my own care, and I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I imagine every person probably has a different relationship to that. Like I could imagine somebody who like always wants to clean their house I can also imagine somebody who is like, well, let me pay somebody to order my house so that I have this time to order this other thing over here in my life. Like Elon Musk, I couldn't imagine him like cleaning his bathroom. Like I would imagine somebody comes and cleans his bathroom for him because he's trying to order something else. And so, yeah, I could see like different people kind of deriving their need for order or they're fulfilling their obligation to order things, let's say, I could see them fulfilling that obligation in ways outside of cleaning their personal space.
That's true. But I'm like, you made that mess. You did that.
Interesting. Yes. So like when Ollie and I had money to the degree that we were having like a cleaner, we prep the house for the cleaner. So like we clean the house for the cleaner so it's ready for her to come over, and then she's not cleaning up like all of my yoga supplies that are all over the floor. I do that for her so that she can vacuum. So there is, and then when she leaves, it's like, oh my God, it feels amazing in here. We want to keep this as clean as we can for as long as we can. And then we'll do this whole cycle again. So there is some participation in the whole event, but it was like, all right, we have the money to have somebody else vacuum the house. Let's have her do that, teach a yoga class or like whatever we did.
And I understand the impulse, and I understand the importance of it. And so like I conceptually understand why somebody would do it, and I can even model it in my own life where I'm like, okay, I washed the floors in the entire house the other day. Mm-hmm. Washing the floors is not like, my mom taught me to wash the floors. And it's an annoying process because it's not with a mop. It's like with a bucket and a rag. Because you can't.
Are you on your hands and knees?
Exactly. And so I'm looking at it and I'm like, it's really interesting because this is basically, it's exercise.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm having to move things around. I'm like lifting things and transferring them to other corners of the house because you have to get everything out of the place that you're washing so you can wash underneath it. And so like I took the entire room apart. I took the entire living room apart. I moved all the carpets out. And so it's like, it took me like 4 hours, but it was like a 4-hour workout.
Yeah.
And I'm like, normally I would go to the gym, but when I go to the gym, it's wasted effort.
Yeah.
And so why would I go to the gym to do a thing that I could do at the house to maintain the house and my body at the same time?
Yeah.
And so it's like, you look at Elon Musk and you're like, Elon, I don't know that you're hitting the gym.
He does look a little doughy.
And it's like, again, I have this like moralistic sense about that where I'm like, it is a moral responsibility to maintain your body. And so all of these things conspire where it's like, it's not a morality that anybody else has. It's not like, it's like I read it in a book. I just have these weird fundamentalist beliefs about the world. And like cleaning your own house is one of them. And I don't know where it came from. But anytime that Shiloh's like, we could just, I don't like cleaning. We can get somebody who does it for us. I'm like, no, we must do it ourselves. And he's just like, why? Like, this isn't the thing. And I feel so, so strongly about it. And
yeah, I can see why you would feel strongly about it,
But I live in
I was out
most of the time.
That's why he's saying that. He's like, I appreciate that you want to clean, but like you never do.
No, it's worse. I'm like, I'm gonna clean, and so are you.
Yeah.
And of course, like I have my mom's standard of cleanliness, and she was a housewife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like her identity was wrapped around how clean it was. And so I'm like, you're gonna clean to my mom's standards. And he's like, that's fucking crazy. And I'm like, nope. So it's a point of tension, to say the least. What were you gonna say?
I don't know. I feel like I was going to bring up this story the other day from the other day that was kind of interesting, but it's not exactly related to this, and I'm forgetting what the link was. There was a link. My brain wouldn't just be like, "Hey, I have this totally unrelated thought for no reason." But do you want me to share the story?
Share the story.
So when Ollie and I are driving around, JK, when Ollie's driving and I'm in the passenger seat, And like something is going on with another driver. Somebody like cuts him off or is going too slow or seems like they're coming into the intersection when they should be at a stop sign, whatever. Ollie will sometimes like call that driver like a name or something, be like, oh, like you fucking asshole or something. And he's not like having a road rage moment. Like there's no like raise in his tone of voice. And he sounds very casual when he's saying it. And usually after he says something like that, I will say something to the effect of, oh, this guy is an older guy. Like he probably just didn't see you. Like I'll kind of come in on the other side of it and say something like this. And like, I'm always like, well, I don't want to be a nag. Like, I don't want to tell somebody to change their behavior for me. Like, if he wants to change his behavior, like that's on him. Like, he needs to want to do that. Like, I don't want to be the person who's coming into his life and is policing, the things that are coming out of his mouth, whatever. It doesn't do anything to me for you to say that. And it was just so interesting that the other day this happened. And then we talked about that moment of like me coming in afterwards and always saying something. And I was like, like I'm not trying to correct your behavior. Like truly, that's not what's going on here. What's going on is that when I hear somebody say like, oh, that's like this fucking asshole, I believe it for a split second. For a split second, I take it in and I internalize it and I inherit this feeling from you, even though in you it might be like this casual, off the cuff, no big deal sort of thing. It registers in me at a little bit deeper level. And when I come back to say, oh, like this person's older, like whatever I fucking say about it to like, bring it back up, I'm essentially just trying to bring my own internal ecosystem back up to neutral. I'm not trying to say, Ollie, change what you're doing. I'm just trying to like get back up to the level I was at before this whole thing started so that I can move on with my day. And it was this so cool moment because like normally, like not normally, but there have been moments where like it's just created like a little bit of tension between us, like those types of moments. And this time it was just like, he understood why I was doing it. And then he also understood that, holy shit, when I say this, it actually brings her down. And it's not a good enough reason for me to change just for me. Like, oh, I shouldn't be calling people assholes. But like, if I know that me calling somebody an asshole is creating this response in this other person, and I don't want this other person to have this response, like that's such a great reason for me to change my behavior. And so it was this very interesting conversation that we ended up having. And this has been like, I mean, since I've known this guy, 10 years, we've been driving in cars together and this little type of exchange has been happening. And then like, finally one day it's just like, oh, let's like move this forward, like actually move this forward. So we're not just like repeating the same thing for the next 10 years.
That's so interesting. I feel like Shiloh and I have the exact same exchange often, and I'm less gracious than you. Where I'll always I'm much less gracious than you. I'm like, what the fuck? He didn't do anything wrong. Like you were going too fast, or you like
right.
You didn't
have your blinker on. He didn't know you were trying to turn, dude. Like, why are you bitching at him?
Literally what I do. Shiloh's always like, why do you never take my side? And I'm like, because you're wrong. And it's
dude,
like,
this is the type of conversation. Yes.
And it's just like, it's crazy because it's really, I think that I have the exact same internal process because I try to look at the world from this perspective of like, okay, if something is infuriating me or irritating me, how do I understand the cause of it in the world as being not that everybody's out to get me? Like, how do I center myself as being the one who is at fault?
Yes, extreme ownership.
And I was doing it before I ever heard of Jocko and his go juice. And it's like, I mean, it must be annoying to have some like moralistic nag. He's like, no, it's not their fault. But I can't help myself. I'm like, look, that's not a good way of looking at the world. And if you can justify to me why that is a good way of looking at the world, fine, I'll accept it. But I'm like, on balance, if it makes the world worse, then why would you do it? But it's like then it enters into this weird place of, like you said, policing people's behavior, policing people's emotions. But I'm like, how do we learn except by hearing from other people the effect that our actions have on them?
Yeah. And I think what was interesting is like all of a sudden he could hear the impact that his actions had on me when he understood that, like, I'm not trying to be his mom. Like, I'm not trying to be the person who's like, stand up straight. I'm trying to share with him that this actually has a negative emotional consequence in my body. And that, like, it's none of my business whether or not he changes, but we are here together in a connection with each other. And therefore, that means that my inner state is relevant for him to know about. And it just so happens that he gives a shit about my emotional state to the degree that he's like, oh, well, like, if this is like creating some negative thing in you that like now you need to like come back up and get out of, yeah, that fucking sucks. Like, I don't want to create that situation in you. I also don't want to have like a partner who's like constantly like telling me what to do. So there is this fine line, because I'm also the type of person where I'm just like, well, I'm not going to not share the impact. I'm going to share the impact with you. You know, if I think you could be doing a better job helping me with the dishes in the kitchen, I'm going to say something.
And it's like, what else are you supposed to do, right? Because I always think about older couples and the resentment that seems inherent in their relationships.
Yeah.
And I can see it cropping up in places sometimes where you have something that for the last 10 years has been a thing and you've never figured out how to talk about it. And the path of that another 10 years down the line is a deep-seated resentment.
Yeah. I've been trying to nip these things. They're difficult. They're delicate, you know, because like they're grooved and patterned, and like they're like these types of things where they're so hot that in a snap of a finger you can go from having just a nice awesome day to like it's apocalyptic. We're breaking up. The entire world is over. I mean, like in the snap of a finger, you know?
Oh my God. It's really so I do you like process trace is what I think the therapy speak for this is.
I not by that language. I don't know what the language is referring to.
So I think that it's in cognitive behavioral therapy. There's this thing called process tracing, where you take an explosion and then you go back upstream of it, event by event, until you get to the place where you reach the foundation of it.
We started doing this within the last year, I would say.
And so this is something that I've always done inherently, because like, so Shiloh and I will get into a screaming match about something, and then he'll go into his room and he has this ability to shift focus, where he's like emotionally like fraught, and he's like, I'm going to work on music, and then he can just turn off and his brain is in the music and he's totally doing it. Me, on the other hand, I go into the other room and I sit there and I'm like, okay, how did I make this happen? And I like go back in time and I like look at all my responses and I'm like, okay, that probably wasn't cool. Okay, that was kind of fucked up. And I usually will, within like, I can talk myself down in like 5 minutes or so. Like I can go from being just like, I fucking hate you, to perhaps I'm not reacting accurately.
Right. Like you're just being a sweet, beautiful baby. And I'm the one who's like overreacting and being totally weird.
Well, no, what it is that it's usually this intermesh. It's like it's the gnashing of teeth, right? It's the gnashing of gears, where
Yeah.
I can look back and I can be like, I reacted poorly to your poor actions at every step of the way. And what happens is that by the time that I'm able to do that, I'll usually go to Shiloh and he's still like, because he hasn't been sitting there thinking about it. He's been thinking about whatever he's working on. And so 5 minutes later, when I go to him and I'm like, hey, like, probably shouldn't have done that, he's still mad because he hasn't gone through and like traced his own bad reactions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really, I haven't, we've gotten better at this where I can see the pattern that happens where if I just leave him alone, let's say we have a big fight and we're not talking, we like don't do anything together. He sleeps, and by the time that he wakes up in the morning, he's like, "I'm sorry."
Mm-hmm.
But I can't wait that long.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, I'm like, this is a problem. We need to solve it immediately. We need to process it immediately. We have to be efficient about this, and then we have to move on. And I'm just like, I can walk you through this. And he's just like, what the fuck, leave me alone. And I'm like, no, it's gonna be better if we do it this way. And that's been a really, at every place that we manage to process trace, there is always a moment of disappointment that seeds the entire process. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like for example, he'll be frustrated with something, and then he'll react to me in a way that's frustrated. And I'll take his frustration really poorly, and I'll react even more frustrated. And so there's this escalation of frustrations until it's a fight. And for a long time, there was this thing where he would be like, why can't you tell the difference between me being frustrated with something and frustrated with you? And I was like, I don't know. And then I thought about it for a long time. And I was like, oh, well, it's because when you're frustrated with something, you then transfer the frustration onto our interaction. And I don't know what's going on inside of you. And so when we interact and you're frustrated with something that I've done, or you're acting frustrated in response to something, there's no way for me to read it as anything except for I am frustrated with you. I don't think anybody could read it otherwise.
Yeah.
Is that familiar?
Yeah, I mean, for in our relationship, it feels like we kind of like toss it, like it's like we pass things back and forth, like we'll pass a bad attitude back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've gotten much better about like, you know, in the early days, when I like didn't really know what was going on, like and I was just sort of a slave to my emotions and very reactive. I mean, we could pass something back and forth for a week or a couple of weeks, you know? And so I think we've gotten a lot better at like reducing the amount of repetitions in one of those cycles. And we've also like developed more language to be able to talk about it. And so it feels less, I mean, we've been really good the last, I mean, probably all of 2023. Like we've had some, we still have some stuff. But it has felt like it used to feel like the world was ending when we would get into like a big fight. And like, what does this mean for our relationship? And it stopped feeling like that. It's felt more just like, oh yeah, like I'm hungry and I can't deal with the fact that he came into my room and wants my attention right now when I'm clearly in the middle of something else. And I have been and I will be for the next 30 minutes. And like, why doesn't he just see that? And then I'll react poorly to something, like I'll snap at him or something like that. That stuff has felt less dramatic. It's felt like we've both been able to like just kind of forgive each other a little bit easier. Like, I get it. Like, I get it, dude. I get it. Being a person is hard. It's hard to have a good day every day. And then I don't know what else has helped.
I think that learning to tolerate difficult emotions also really helps, because for me, it's like I do the exact same thing that you're saying, which is that something is happening and I snap, and then, like you said, we pass it back and forth. And it's like, I'm really trying to train myself to be able to take frustration in a way where I don't externalize it outward.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if I'm doing something and I'm busy with it and it's frustrating me, then I have to find a way to see that frustration and then to kind of float over it. And to be able to be,
Yeah.
this is frustrating, but it's not me. Like I will figure this out and it's going to be all right. And I have enough confidence in my own ability to leave something and come back to it that I can deal with. I fail constantly, but I can try to deal with it in a way where it doesn't get externalized. And I'm still terrible at it. Like I think sometimes because since we do the podcast a lot, we actually had this thing where I uploaded the wrong version of the podcast the other day. I uploaded the unedited version.
Mm.
And in between, there's a moment where we finish the podcast and then we like use the bathroom or whatever, come back and record the introduction.
Mm-hmm.
And we had like a little fight in the middle of that, where he was introducing the guest and he had done it incorrectly and I was correcting him and he was annoyed and I was annoyed at him. And so there was this like little tiff. And I uploaded that to YouTube. Like, I mean, it was at the end of like a 3-hour conversation. So it's like, I don't think that anybody like got to the end to see it.
Yeah.
But there was the moment of horror where I was like, oh my God. And so right? Because it's just like in your most intimate, stupid moment is out for the world to see.
Yeah.
And I've started thinking about it since then where I'm like, okay, am I behaving in a way in private that I would in a room full of people?
Oh, dude, for sure. The podcast with like the Daily Stoic that Ollie and I are doing, I feel the same way about it where I'm like, crap, there's like this moment where we're together before I press record and then I press record and there is something that's like a little bit shifts, like right before I feel okay to give you this feedback in this particular way of like, hey, you really need to speak up. Like, what's wrong with you? Come on. Like, why are you whispering over here? You know that our sound sucks. Come on, stop it. But like, if I had pressed record and now that's out there, I would not be okay with somebody seeing that.
And it's like people always talk about the fact that you have to have a public self and a private self. And I'm like, that's true. But your fundamental way of dealing with people and dealing with difficult situations cannot be different on camera than it is in private. Like that level of care for somebody else. Because it's not necessarily okay, so technically there's a sociopathic kernel in it where I'm like, I don't want to look bad.
Totally.
I don't want people to see me act this way. And I'm like, that I think is kind of fucked up. Because if I don't want people to see me acting that way, why am I acting this way? And letting the person who is the nearest and dearest to me have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a case of change being motivated by not wanting to look bad. But at the heart of hearts, it's because I've recognized that the way that I am when I'm just like off the cuff complaining about something or giving feedback is just not cool. Like I wouldn't do it that way to a stranger.
I wouldn't do that to my coworker at work.
Right. But I think that we're all trained in these family relationships where people are just unrepentant dicks all the time. Like because you have this fear where you go out and you work and you do things and you're constrained by the fact that you could get fired, that you could ruin your coworker relationships, where
your reputation, like if you lose it at work, like you're like, I don't want to do that, like my reputation. But somehow it's like, well, if I just like go off of my wife, like she's discreet, like, or like we're discreet at home. What happens at home stays at home.
And so I think that I've been really, really focused on what if someone else was in the room watching this? Would I be embarrassed by my own actions? And that's really helped a lot, because then I can just take a step back and be like, well, yeah, obviously. Like I'm not at the
Yeah.
point where I can restructure immediately, but having the lens sitting in the back
Yeah.
of my mind really helps.
Yeah. I actually think recording this podcast has been like really helpful for us in that regard,
Mm,
for like that specific reason of like, crap, like just because I think I'm right about something doesn't mean that I don't need to pay attention to the delivery. And I will oftentimes get that confused where I will feel very righteous about something and the righteousness turns into self-righteousness. And now I'm just treating you like shit because I think I'm right about something and it's not cool.
there is this tendency though of a certain brand of feminism, I think, whose entire point is the fact that you don't have to deliver things gently.
Yes. And I would say the women in my family definitely embodied that sort of style. It was sort of like, we get to give you feedback however we want, and you need to shut the fuck up and take it. And the less you talk and express yourself, the better for us, the more we will like you. That was, I don't know if that's how they felt inside, but as a child, like in this environment, that's really what the vibe seemed to be. Like I never, when I was watching movies as a kid, there was still like the kind of archetypal patriarch of the family, like the strong father figure. And I was like looking around my house and my family's houses and my friends' houses. I was like, I do not see this strong patriarch here. I see like women who are in charge of their household and everyone else better shut the fuck up.
Right. And so there, that is sort of the, I mean, that wasn't the case in my house, right? Like the case in my house
Well,
was
yes,
definitely,
you had the standard patriarchal father that I was like, who has this anymore?
but it's like, it's crazy because I can see I can literally hear him talking out of my mouth sometimes.
Yes, I can hear my mom talking out of my mouth.
And I'm like, no, because I hated it. And it's weird because I hated it when I was a kid. But now that I've grown up, I'm like, I also get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understand why he was like that. And I can see in myself the emotional landscape that drives somebody to act like that. And so I catch myself doing it and I'm like, oh man, that's so fucked up because it's like, my mom always would ask, she's like, well, you had two examples, right? Like you had your dad being aggressive and you had me not being aggressive. Like, why wouldn't you take after me? Because I'm a fighter. Like, I'll fight, and that's fucked. It's fucked because that's not a good thing to have in interpersonal relationships. But I'm like, that's in my nature, and that's a thing that I have to deal with. And my mom was always like, "Why can't you not fight? Like, why didn't you learn from me?" And I was like, "Well, your position always seemed really powerless."
Mm.
And my dad got to mold the environment to his preferences. The world operates according to what my dad likes and wants. And I want that.
Well, yeah, of course you want the position of more power. Who wouldn't?
But it's like, it's not really tenable in a relationship. Like to make a relationship about a power struggle of this is what I want and it will be so. It's like what you were saying, where you're what, policing behavior and you're telling somebody what can come out of their mouth, or
Yeah.
it's just really, it's pretty twisted.
Yeah, it backfires for sure. But yeah, I mean, there was so much power dynamics in my parents' relationship. And I was the same way. I was like, why would I like model anything off of my dad who kind of just dealt with her by ignoring her and going to his room? I was like, that's not the type of life I'm trying to have. Like to me, he seemed like just someone who was like kind of under a rock or something, like a turtle, like kind of like needing to retreat somewhere. And I was like, that's not who I want to be. Like, I want to be the person who, like, if I want to be in this room, I will be in this room. If I want to be in that room, I will be in that room. If I want to be at Disneyland, I will be at Disneyland. You know, like, this is who I'm trying to be.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because since I have two siblings, like my sister is definitely more like my dad, and my brother's more like my mom. Where he seems to have, like, somebody the other day said that the real the success of a relationship depends on you being able to carry high voltage emotions without breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
And my emotions are super high voltage. Like it's just like the needle goes crazy. And my mom, I think, is too, but she's able to kind of clamp it down, and so she keeps it inside.
Mm-hmm.
And with my brother, I feel like his needle doesn't go as much. So he's able to, like, it takes a lot more to get him to the point. I've never seen him upset. Ever. Like he can get kind of annoyed. He can be like, he can feel pressurized and like be frustrated, but I've never seen him blow up. I've never seen him get upset about anything. Ever. They're in 25 years. And I'm like, I don't know if it's because he's missing some kind of emotional processing. Like, part of me, oh my God, I don't know if I told you this. I asked him the other day, I was like, how do you deal with the voices in your head? And he's like, what voices? And I was like, well, you know, like the people that you talk to when you're like figuring something out, or like the sort of the emotional processing that you do inside of yourself as you're like examining different facets of something. And he's like, there's just one voice. It's just me. And I'm like, that's wild, because I definitely have at least like 3 perspectives inside of myself.
Mm-hmm. I haven't identified how many characters there are, but there's definitely different flavors of the self-talk. It's not a consistent point of view amongst all the self-talk just going through stream of consciousness. Yeah, it feels more like a group or something.
Oh, and I feel like I have a voice that's really antagonistic and is kind of like burn it down.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have the voice of reason, which is like, no, that's probably not the best thing to do right now. And then there's just like probably one other voice that's just like not thinking about the task at hand, and it's just like thinking of something else.
I feel like I have 6 of those guys. They're just like constantly trying to take me away. Until it's like I'm on a call and someone's like, Britton, what do you think? And I'm like, I've not been paying attention.
Do you think that you could restate it? Can you restate the question in a simpler way?
It's my fault. I'm stupid, you guys. Mm-hmm. I was paying attention. I'm just stupid. Yeah. Better. It's better, right?
Definitely. Yeah. So I think that maybe he's just highly integrated, or he's not tuned in. I don't know. I can't tell, because I'm like, is it the fact that you just don't have these emotions, and so that's why you're so calm? Or do you have the emotions and you're able to just not pay attention to them?
Like suppressing them. You would think, though, if there's like some suppression or something, that like there would be like these explosions every so often, you know? The fact that he's been so consistent his entire life makes me think that it's more, he's being more congruent about it, and they're just not there.
Like, he told me that he and his girlfriend never fight. Fiance. And I was like, what do you mean you never fight? And he's like, well, if I can tell that it's getting heated, like if it starts to get heated, he breaks it. And he's like, let's talk about this later.
Okay.
And I'm like, and it appears to work.
Yeah, I mean, what I've noticed between sometimes in the stuff that I get heated on with Ollie is like, it's really just pointless shit that doesn't matter. And if I can just leave it alone for a few hours, we don't even need to have a retrospective about the whole thing. Like, we don't need to get into the whole he said, she said, I'm sorry, or anything. We can just move the fuck on with our day, and there's no residue left over. If I'm not the one who's bringing it back, like, oh, okay, well, like we should probably, like wrap this up in a tiny bow. And I'm starting to realize, like, maybe this doesn't need as much repair as I think it does. Like that, even my obsession about the repair is maybe making things worse sometimes.
Yes. I feel you, because I think I'm the same way, where I'm like, okay, we have to analyze this, and we have to figure out what happened and how to prevent it from happening again. And so there is this need to just be like, maybe it's just okay. Like maybe it's, I do think that saying sorry is really important. And
yeah, I think so too. I do think so. I'm just like trying to say, like, there's sometimes where the processing is really helpful and like it definitely needs to happen. And then there are like these other times where I'm like, oh, you know what? Like, I don't even need to say, I can say I'm sorry. And you could say you're sorry, but also we could just have a fucking awesome day and it would be the same thing.
I'm not so enlightened. I'm like, we are not moving on until we acknowledge that we did something fucked up. And I just like, I think, and maybe this is something that's going to shift, but I'm like, look, I think that it's really important to get to the point of being able to identify the places where we're fucking up. And I speak about this for myself too, right? Where it's like, if I fuck something up, I need him to point it out to me. Like, I need him to be like, yo, that wasn't cool. And go through the process of being like, you're right, I'm sorry. And I will fix it. And I recognize that what I did wasn't cool, because there's this thing where it's like, I think you hold on to these things over time. Like we talked earlier, where if there's a thing that somebody's doing often and you never get to talk about it and you never get to process it, that's where the resentment builds.
Yes, 100%.
And so there's like, I think about it kind of like skincare, where there is the change in behavior. So I don't think that you've ever had problems with your skin, but I get a lot of acne. And I've realized that there's certain things that I eat or do that cause the pimples. And when I have the pimples, it's almost impossible for me not to squeeze them out because they hurt. The problem is, though, is that when you express a pimple, it scars, it can get infected, it makes it worse. And so I'm like, look, there's two steps to this. One step is the antecedent, which is I will do things like wash my pillowcase and eat the right things and wash my face so that my skin stays clear. And then when I do have a breakout, I'll do what I can to process it in a way that doesn't scar. And that's kind of, I'm trying to like put that frame onto the frame of the relationship, where I'm like, okay, well, what are the things that I have to do in order to make the ground smoother to begin with, so that when something does come up on it, I can deal with it in a way that's less aggressive. Because it's not enough to just eternally let things go, I think.
No, that's absolutely true. And I didn't mean to suggest that like letting it go was like brushing it under the rug. I think like there's like, we've gotten to this point right now where it's sort of obvious when one or both of us is misbehaving. And then the other one will just be like, okay, I'm going to go away. Like, you can misbehave, you can raise your voice, you can use this language, but I'm not going to be here for it. And so when those moments sort of happen, it really is situationally dependent, but there have been a few times where it's just sort of like, we know that we've made up. Like, we know that like, okay, the eye contact is back, and like, I can hug you and feel like we are, like holding each other, rather than like kind of like that frozen hug that sometimes happens when it's like, hey, are we done fighting yet? Like, we tried to be done fighting. Let's hug. And then you hug and you realize we're not done fighting.
What is that?
This is not a real hug. This is two frozen popsicles standing next to each other, pretending like the fight is over.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the moment of thaw.
Yeah.
Because it really does feel like something needs to be expressed, something needs to be pushed out into the world in order for the healing to actually happen.
Oh, for sure. I mean, my theory on it is like, with this concept of intention versus impact, it's like I feel like the fight is over when he understands what my intentions were. Because this is where a lot of the fights happen, is like, I didn't mean to, but I did create this terrible volcanic eruption for you. But I didn't mean to. And until you hear that I didn't mean to, I'm going to keep saying I didn't mean to. I didn't fucking mean to. I didn't mean to. I don't care that you're covered in ash. I didn't fucking mean to do it. So sucks to be you that you're covered in ash, but that wasn't me. Right. So like until he's able to hear that, I can't really let it go. But then also like he can't really let it go until I actually accept that he's covered in ash. And like, regardless of what I intended, this is what happened. And so my theory on like the repair is like both parties need to feel like my intention was understood and I understand the impact that my behavior had on the other person. And if we can both get to that point together, the problem is that one of both of us will be stubborn in one of those areas and we'll play the stubborn game like, no, I'm not going to see that you were just to be good. Because what you did was so bad. It was so bad for me. And I don't give a shit that it was good in your head.
Oh my God, that's exactly it. Okay, so last question. By the time that you get to a fight, do you think that it's possible for one person to be blameless?
No.
I kind of have the same opinion where I'm like, if you're a dick and the other person just kind of like absorbs it, that's a clear at fault behavior. Like, I've been a dick, you've taken it, you haven't exploded. Clearly you're like kind of hurt by it. I have to fix that. But the moment that it's like somebody's a dick and then the other person's a dick back,
yeah,
I'm like, this is fucked.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess it's just the eternal process of realizing that you don't have the problem that you think you have. To wrap it back, right? Because you think that your problem is the fact that the other person was a dick, but really your problem was the fact that you were a dick.
You're a dick. Yeah, that's when the fight ends. The fight ends when you stop wanting the other person to learn their lesson and you say, fuck, I have a lesson. This is the lesson. Okay, I'm learning this lesson. Okay, it's really none of my business whether this other person learns theirs. As much as I want them to learn their lesson, that's really not my task. My task is to learn my lesson, and that's all I can fucking do. And then if I do that and they do that, that's when the fight is over.
Because usually I'll get stuck at the place where I'm like, I'm going to learn my lesson, but you haven't learned yours yet, have you?
Exactly.
And that can go on for a long time. But making up is fun too. Like I've been trying to figure out, because the place where you make up, I think is really emotional and it's very like endearing and there's like a softness to it.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that it can be easy to get addicted to the process of breaking something and then fixing it because it's a moment of emotional intimacy that you don't have regularly.
On the regular, yeah.
And so I've been like trying to recalibrate that because at some point Shiloh and I Shiloh would always be like, you love to fight. And I was like, I don't love to fight, but there is something that changes in the tenor of our relationship after we fight that I do like.
Mm-hmm.
And finding ways to create that without the disruption is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, how do you get there?
It's like we went through something hard together, and then that makes the relationship more solid on the other side of it. And I feel that way about my relationships at work too. It's like they feel the way that my relationships build at work and go from something superficial to something like just much deeper is like, fuck, we went through this hard time together and this hard time and this hard time. And this conversation was really difficult to get through. And so was this one. And so was this one. And like now on the other side of it, it's like, dude, like I'm so plugged in that like, let's just move this shit forward. It feels fucking awesome.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, let's leave it till next week.
That sounds good.
Awesome.